Iraqis coming in and out of the city. In clashes outside the city, Royal Marines captured 5 senior Iraqi officers and killed a Republican guard. Meanwhile, Iraq says it shot down 2 US Apache helicopters, killing the 2-man crew of one of them. The US says it has no reports of downed aircraft. US troops are reinforcing after landing in Kurdish-controlled northern Iraq. Whatever the political wrangling, it seems the push is still towards Baghdad. Sasha Herriman, ITV News.
Blocks on the southern outskirts. They appear to be controlling movement in and out of the city. Many Iraqis appear to be crossing a bridge and surrendering to Allied forces. They're being subjected to rigorous searches as the fear of suicide bombings increases.
Doing now is becoming proactive, no longer just willing to monitor and secure the convoy and supply lines here. They want to get out and try to find out where the FEDAYEEN or these paramilitary units may be operating on. Today, very early this morning, in fact, before the sun came up, we rode along with some Marines, several platoons, as they went in on a nearby village. Moving in with APCs, armored personnel carriers, and also Marines on foot, and approaching from several different angles all at the same time, because they were fearing that if they went in one direction, then the people they're looking for could be running out the back in another direction. That was something they were determined to stop. It was tense, but once they got into the village, they didn't go kicking doors down. They went to find the village elders, wanted to find the man who was in charge, the chief in this particular case, or the sheikh. They did find him and talk to him about whether or not there had been any of these units working out of his village, perhaps living in and around the hovels that people call their homes. In fact, he said no, there had been some, but they had left a number of days ago. And it was interesting, what started off as a search and destroy mission then became a humanitarian effort, because you see, these villagers are so cut off. They say that their water supply, the pumping station, had been shut down by Iraqi soldiers 5 days ago, and as a result of that, their children were becoming ill because they're drinking water out of culverts or out of stagnant little river streams there. So the U.S. military, in this case the Marines, said, fine, we will work, you take us to where the pumping station is, we'll get the water flowing again. It may seem like a simple story, but it's very important, because the Marines believe that if they can win over the confidence of the people here, then the security net, or at least the safe harbor for these forces that have been interfering with the supply lines and striking at U.S. positions, would be cut out from underneath them. They don't want to go all the way to Baghdad and have to fight all the way to get there.
They shot down an Apache helicopter and killed the pilot, the 2 pilots, and the other Apache fled, and they buried the 2 pilots.
British Royal Marines stormed a southeastern suburb of Basra before dawn Sunday. British commanders saying their forces killed a high-ranking Iraqi paramilitary officer, captured 2 high-ranking paramilitaries.
Here appears to be increasingly tense. A few moments ago, out on the horizon, not very far ahead of the U.S. Army's 3rd Squadron, 7th Cavalry, we heard more than a few explosions.
The U.S. Army's 3rd Squadron, 7th Cavalry has compiled a rather extraordinary record in the past several days. It was the first unit to cross the Euphrates River and then punch northward to within 60 miles of Baghdad. It was the Army which assigned me to the 3rd Squadron, 7th Cavalry, and that was extremely fortuitous. It was like sitting in a poker game and drawing 4 aces, because this is a crack unit. It's the tip of the spear. We've had an absolutely terrific story pushing forward north towards Baghdad. 72 hours of that was under constant fire coming at us from both sides of the road.
We just heard an income. What the hell? No, I don't know what it is.
Recall Winston Churchill's old quote, "There's nothing so exhilarating as being shot at and missed." What you try to do is stay calm and continue your broadcasting. That the worst thing you can do, either as a soldier or as a war correspondent, is panic. We're hearing incoming. We're not sure what it is. We see some stuff in the sky. We may have to break this off. I think we're going to break off this live shot for the time being. We're not sure what we see up there. Goodbye. We've got to dive for vehicles, we think. See ya. Bye.
We have been under heavy fire for the past couple miles, mostly a small arms fire, but the sandstorm has enabled the Iraqis to come very close to the road. And if I sound a little nervous, it's because we're in a soft-skinned vehicle and everybody else is in armor.
We'd like to now show you what we call Old Betsy, a reused, a second-hand U.S. Army Humvee that we've been traveling with. Any bullet will pass through it, even a .22 caliber bullet. You can see our body armor draped on the door. This is what we've literally been living in. This is the kitchen when we're down, and we are very fortunate because we've got a teapot. That's my cubby hole. It's extraordinarily cramped because Paul Jordan sandbagged the floor in case we hit a mine. That's all the space I have to eat and sleep in.
You don't sleep. You really don't sleep out here. Of course, you're on an adrenaline high, but racing across the desert, you know that you're traveling toward the jaws of what could be a major military battle. You have to realize they've been riding along, bouncing along in these tanks for probably 6 or more hours now. And if you ride inside that tank, it is like riding in the bowels of a dragon. They roar, they screech.
The hardest part of the trip is personal discomfort. We cannot tell you the levels of personal discomfort we've experienced. The extraordinary sandstorms, the bitter cold nights. The most uncomfortable thing is having to sleep sitting up in a Humvee with sandbags under your feet, your knees at your chin. That's excruciatingly uncomfortable. Not something that you would wish on anybody but a contortionist. Let me give you an example of what the dust is like. Look at this tarp. We have been through days of dust like that.
The U.S. Army 7th Cavalry has just taken 3 Iraqi prisoners of war. Actually, they're very close, that is to say, no more than 40 yards away. But the dust and sand are blowing so badly, you're getting these vague images. It's like being in a blizzard, except unfortunately, the sand doesn't melt as the snow does.
What we eat is what the Army calls MREs, meals ready to eat. And I must say, they're pretty darn good. And of course, everybody fights for the best ones. The treats are things like the M&Ms and some of the breakfast toasties. The Army's eating much, much better than the grandfathers of these soldiers did and the great-grandfathers of these soldiers in the Second World War.
Day, hundreds upon hundreds of people have been coming out to get food. Some of them return to the city. Sometimes they don't. There's a bridge that leads across to the city. Apparently some shots were fired. People getting into defensive positions. Soldiers alongside civilians. You can see what appears to be the effects of an oil fire that was lit by Iraqi defenders of Basra, a fire that they hoped would obscure targets inside for any helicopter fire. There have been ongoing exchanges of artillery and other kinds of fire, and as we just heard there was a breakout by some Iraqi armor out of Basra, and British forces responded. This would be the scene then where the civilians are normally coming out of the city. You can see there many of them taking cover behind that tank, probably far more people than that tank could protect. But something is better than nothing. Civilians scrambling to safety. It is unclear to us. We have the videotape and you're looking at it. It's unclear where the fighting or where the shooting originated. Obviously, it's startled, frightened many of the children that are there, their parents trying to get them out of harm's way. There's an ongoing standoff outside of Basra. This is a scene that's likely to be repeated again and again as British soldiers lay siege, sometimes moving right into the city itself. Those are the latest pictures.
Truck was detected. There were 3 Iraqi civilians on that pickup truck, and commanders here believe that they may be an advanced scout party for the Iraqi FEDAYEEN guerrillas. And so as a result of that, 2 Apache helicopters launched, and some of the video, as you see, 3 suspects were detained. They were forced to kneel down. They put their hands up and later forced to take off some of their clothes, and the vehicle was searched. No guns or weapons were found, Jim, I'm told, but those men are still under detention, pending interrogation with an interpreter to find exactly what they were doing so close to the perimeter here.
Carl, very interesting pictures there and a very interesting application of the helicopter force that is up there. On another subject, just in case you've heard anything, there are reports coming from Baghdad that 2 Apache helicopters were shot down today by Iraqi forces, or in the last 24 hours. Any word on that? Did you hear anything about downed helicopters?
I have heard the troops here talking about them. I understand that one of the reports was that there was a downed Apache helicopter near BASRA. The comments here, though, that there are no Apache attack helicopters based around BASRA. Most of the Apaches
made a very strong point about the opening, as he termed it, of a serious threat to Iraqi forces from the north in Iraq. Let's turn to the map a brief moment and take a look at what all that means in a broader context. First of all, he stressed the opening of this airfield, Harir, not only with the 173rd, which we saw a couple of days ago, but now increasingly, Jim, the arrival of 105mm howitzers, a substantial number of wheeled vehicles to give that unit tactical mobility. Further, we've been seeing in the vicinity of Halak, just north of Erbil, these massive B-52 strikes reminiscent of Afghanistan, where in the open, in the clear, high-flying precision ordnance has been delivered against Iraqi units guided by apparently special ops troops on the ground, very reminiscent of the Afghan campaign, but probably also, Jim, targeted against the one guard division in that area, the Nebuchadnezzar division. Let's also now move to the center-south. Very important development on the close-in map. General Franks referred to this as well in his briefing. 3 cities, Jim, that are so awfully important for the coalition in terms of removing the remaining pockets of paramilitary forces. Let me highlight those. Najaf first, essentially surrounded now, apparently, by the coalition 101st Airborne Division. Second, Nasiriyah. We've seen intense fighting here with the Marines clearing the south bank of the Euphrates by that city. And finally, Basra itself, UK Marine commandos capturing an important Iraqi general and killing several leaders in that city. Jim, this just reflects the very, very intense coalition operations that are building up there as well to clear these last pockets and secure supply lines. Finally, Jim, just looking at Baghdad itself, very, very important series of coalition attacks in that city, not only against the apartment buildings housing key leaders, but increasingly, Jim, against not just Medina, but the other guard divisions in the area, the heavy guard divisions that will be so central to shaping this battlefield for the coming ground operations. Most intense air operations against those divisions. We'll see that pick up even more in these coming hours and days.
Toward a city, we can see some lights in front of them. But you're right, the way it appears to us, it is quite bold operations that they're mounting. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I can't see the video that you're talking about, but certainly they've told us that they are mounting operations often around the clock, and there is regular Iraqi fire at them. I mean, the Iraqi resistance continues inside the city of Basra, whether it be irregulars or the Iraqi regular army. Also, as we've been mentioning, there's that situation on the southeast where, if you remember, over the last couple of days, we had sort of sporadic reports of tanks sort of bursting forth from the southeast of Iraq, or rather of Basra. And at first we were told it was a column of, you know, up to 50 or 70 tanks. That, of course, was scaled back. They told us it was 3 tanks. And then we've had this other report over the last couple of days of British Command, or British 7th Armored taking on some Iraqi tanks. So this ongoing effort in the southeast today was complemented. So there are basically military activities going on around the west and the southeast of Basra quite regularly.
All right, we're told now that these are pictures from overnight, and clearly they are showing some fire coming, at least what I see right here, coming from some of the British armor as it's moving around there. And there we can see much more clearly that they are on the outskirts of the city. No doubt about that as they mount these things. Christian, as British forces become bolder, moving in like this, and we see the civilians becoming somewhat bolder, traveling in and out of the city, is there any measure of the morale, of the status of the Iraqi forces that are inside Basra?
You know, hard to tell. I must be very frank. It's really, to me, I find it very puzzling to try to guess what's going on inside Basra. We don't have very good information. I mean, there's the odd person who goes in and out. It's extremely dangerous for journalists. You've heard about these Italians who tried to go in and basically got caught. We're just basically relying on whatever snippets we can get, and really all we can do is report what we're being told, either by those who are inside Basra, whether they're phoning out, or by those on the military side. But it seems to me that there are civilians who are coming out, and a lot of them are saying they're coming to seek shelter, they're trying to get water, and some of them coming out to bring their families out. We see a lot of men coming, and of course a lot of men who want to go back again. So it is at the moment puzzling, not only to us as journalists outside, but I must say I believe it's puzzling to the UK military as well, because they have been trying to get a fix on just what is the system of control inside there, what it is about the situation in Basra, how much of a hold does the army and the irregulars actually have on the population as compared to the resistance they're firing at the British. So it's rather confused at the moment.
Or 7 in the evening in Baghdad, and you can see clouds of smoke rising up from fires that are burning. This appears to be in the heart of Baghdad. These pictures coming to us from Arabic language television broadcaster Al Arabiya. Let's listen for a moment. It is very difficult to tell where this missile has struck. Missile or bomb has struck. One Arab network, Al Jazeera, reporting this missile has hit a residential neighborhood. This burning in a way that is not normally seen in U.S. air attacks that have a tendency to bring down the buildings, to implode the buildings around them. That the way some of the newer weapons are designed, that an effort to hit a target and not cause collateral damage. We did indeed see some of those tanks on fire. Now, up until now, we hadn't really seen that. These battle tanks had withstood a lot of direct hits. There, one you can see. General, you talk a little bit here and tell us what you make of this.
Well, 2 comments here, Jim. First of all, the fighting around An-Najaf has been unbelievably intense. It is, as one knows, a Shia shrine, very, very holy Shia shrine. The paramilitary forces of Saddam have defended this intensely against air attacks, and apparently now against some elements of the coalition forces that are with M1 tanks. We've heard that those M1s have apparently been attached to the 101st Airborne. The 101st Airborne has as its mission, Jim, the seizure and clearing of this town. What may well have happened in one of those cases, it looks like a tank went off the road into a ditch at night in matters of smoke and obscurance. That can be a danger. The other may well have been hit by an anti-tank missile, which apparently have been found. Those missiles have been found in some numbers in the presence of the paramilitary. It looks like a very, very intense operation indeed around Najaf in these coming hours.
British soldiers and civilians coming under fire.
Right, everybody get back in the wagon now.
At a checkpoint on the outskirts of the southern Iraqi city of Basra. Soldiers moved forward to locate the source of the gunshots as terrified Iraqis sought cover wherever they could find it.
So we've opened fire to both areas and called in fire to that building there. The main problem now is getting the civilians to push back, so when the explosions go off we don't get any civilian casualties, which would be catastrophic.
The soldiers of the Irish Guards had been given the job of checking those leaving or entering the encircled city for weapons. Women and children were allowed through, but men were stopped and searched. But as the crowd threatened to become unmanageable, efforts to check everyone were abandoned, though several men were arrested and taken away. During the night, the Challenger tanks of the Black Watch engaged in another firefight with Iraqi forces. Further north, the Americans have been in action too. This and Nasiriyah, The town, dubbed Ambush Alley by US soldiers, would have strategic importance in the drive to Baghdad. A drive politicians say is not paused, but still ongoing.
The resistance that's been encountered has been, in pockets, quite stiff. It's going to get more difficult. As we move closer to Baghdad, there's no question but that you're going to begin confronting the Republican Guard, and I would suspect that the most dangerous and difficult days are still ahead of us.
Yesterday it did get worse. 4 US soldiers killed by the first suicide bomb attack. This morning a group of around 15 soldiers were hurt when a truck was driven at them in Kuwait. But commanders say suicide bombers were expected and can be countered.
What it means is that, that all of our troops will exercise caution, will increase the standoff to civilian vehicles, and the things that I think would be common sense to anyone.
Iraqi television has been showing more captured US vehicles. This correspondent reporting that an armoured bulldozer and a tank were seized by tribesmen near Najaf. But although much of their equipment was taken, the tank crew apparently managed to escape. Ben Ando, 5 News.
SADDAM's classroom. On the curriculum here, nuclear, biological and chemical warfare. Coalition troops say they discovered this NBC training cell at a military base in southern Iraq. Inside, vials of unknown liquid, which experts believe could be dilute active nerve agents, such as sarin or VX. There are warnings about the possible effects attached to the ampules. And atropine, used to treat nerve agent victims, is in plentiful supply. Crated up alongside, NBC suits and respirators. The recipient's address, Ministry of Defense, Baghdad, Iraq. Much of it is brand new.
Some of the dates on the auto pens, the combo pens there, are manufactured 2002, run out 2005. And in the boxes behind us here, we've got some respirators. They may be older style respirators, but they're in pristine condition.
On the walls, training posters of how to deal with various types of nuclear, chemical or biological attack. This is proof that Saddam Hussein was training his troops for chemical warfare. What we don't know, of course, is whether or not he was proposing to use it on coalition forces or expected them to use it against him. Elsewhere, the fighting here in southern Iraq goes on. These Royal Marines had to rescue colleagues fired on from the marshes around Basra before heading back out to confront the enemy. More troops await their orders to move. Fast speedboats crammed with Marines preparing to leave to patrol the waterways and reed beds sheltering the Iraqi snipers. David Bowden in southern Iraq.
It's a Russian one.
Is it Russian?
Yeah.
These are not weapons taken from the Iraqi army. These rifles, machine guns and grenades had been sitting in the homes of ruling Ba'ath Party members in one small town. Most were handed in to soldiers of the 1st Battalion of the Royal Irish Regiment. Much of the war in the southern oil fields has become a counter-terrorism offensive.
I believe I have now effectively squashed. They handed in all their weapons with serial number lists to prove to me that everything they own they've given to me now and have effectively surrendered to me. The difficulty now is that I've got to coordinate the humanitarian agencies to fill that vacuum that's left behind by the Ba'ath Party, and also to make sure the normal people have what they need.
In the long term, the oil under the ground will determine much about what happens to towns around here and those all over Iraq. But the British forces face a more pressing problem in the short, and that is quite simply the terrifying shadow that Saddam Hussein still casts over this country. The next phase is returning the town school to the children in the next few days. It's part of the process of making the community around the oil fields self-sufficient once again. With senior Ba'ath Party figures under arrest and the weapons now being decommissioned, the threat is reducing every day. But it will still be some time before the people here have control of their own destiny. Greg Milam, Southern Iraq.
Under the cover of darkness, Royal Marine Commandos head up towards Basra. Through a night vision camera, we see them opening fire on Iraqi troops who have, say the British, moved south out of the city. There are ferocious exchanges of fire. The men of 40 Commando are taking on what they believe is an entire Iraqi battalion, perhaps 500 troops. Mortars explode all around the little village of Abu al-Hasib. Flares light up the sky, and in the end, the Marines claim victory, reporting dozens of Iraqis killed or captured. Just after daybreak, gunfire rings out in the city of Basra itself. Civilians run for their lives.
Right, everybody get back in the wagon now.
British troops dash for cover too. They're under attack from Iraqi paramilitaries and they call in artillery support. These terrified families have got caught in the crossfire. People seek shelter wherever, however they can.